how many billions of dollars that they lose. And then I'm like, okay, I feel better about myself.
If you refuse to give up and you also improve, it's guaranteed that you're going to win.
You can't see the big picture if you're in the weeds of all of the business stuff. So like taking a moment to zoom out and just realizing, like what you were saying, it's temporary.
No matter what situation there is, whether it's a good time or a bad time, it's not going to be forever.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Agency U podcast. What's going on, Gilberto?
What's up, man?
What's going on?
It's going to be an interesting one.
Be a good one. We're going to talk about dealing with hard times in agency. I mean, agencies don't have hard times, right, Gilberto? Everything's so good, like what Instagram
not
makes
at
it out
all.
to be.
Yeah, all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, everything's good. It's all about leads, making money, hashtag entrepreneur. So it's not. So we're going to talk about just a couple of we're really just going to dive into like mindset, some stories from our businesses, and hopefully have you guys take away some tips and just some like practicalities, because unfortunately, like hard times come in business. I don't think it's a matter of like if, I think it's a matter of when for many people. And if you're not like mentally prepared or unsure how to grasp it when it does happen, it's just going to make it that much worse. So, Gilberto, what's going down, man?
Yeah, so I think a good one to start off with, like I think for both of us, is just kind of sharing like in general, like certain like mental shifts, or like in general, like during hard times, what you, Austin, like have been, what you've thought of and what your thought process was, and like kind of how you thought about the situation. I could share some of mine as well.
Yeah.
Because I know for myself and like other agencies, I know during 2020, like when the pandemic happened, like that was a rough time for a lot of them. A lot of just people in general, but like specifically in the agency world, like there was a lot of like, I'm sure clients canceling and all that kind of stuff. People just in general freaking out. If you were like in the restaurant niche, I'm sure people were extremely like impacted. So being a restaurant marketing agency probably wasn't the most fun during that time. So for me, like I remember in 2020, the pandemic happened. I like, for me specifically, I remember during that time it was rough just because a lot of people, anytime something like that happens, there's a lot of like uncertainty, and on sales calls, you can really like, you can see it like right off the bat. Whenever that happened, there was a lot of like people not closing, people like deals that just fell through the pipeline, because it's something sudden that happens, and it really just like, it jars up your whole world, because it's like deals that should have closed didn't, and then like current clients like hitting you up, potential cancellations and all that stuff that happens all at once. So I remember during that time, I was in my head, there were like several things that were going on, and certain things that have like helped me even in like the beginning, because that was another an example of like a really tough time, like really tough time in my life, but just in like in the agency as well, is like those starting steps. So generally what went on in my mind is like, this is not temporary, like this will pass. This is not a situation that will be forever.
Yeah.
Even though it like, the thing about like tough times in your agency is like, it feels like emotionally, it feels like this is going to like go on for a very extremely long time, but your emotions affect your mind, and like it's hard to see clearly. But I always kind of like use this as my compass, like, yeah, like no matter what my emotions are telling me, like this will pass. It's not going to be forever. There are brighter times at the end, and there was like pretty much at the end of that, like completely like during that time, actually, like I was consistently growing and stuff, but it's because I got like just tougher. And then by the end, towards like the end of that year, things really took off, especially in that next year to follow in 2021.
Yeah.
So having the mindset of like, hey, this is like not something that's going to be permanent, despite what your emotions are telling you, is something that's just like a mantra to keep in your head, because it's the truth. Like no matter what situation there is, whether it's a good time or a bad time, it's not going to be forever. So keeps you like humble, in the times that are really good, and then keeps you strong in the times that might be down. The other one that I found to be super, super helpful, this was something that my mentor a while back in 2020 had told me that has always stuck with me, is like the end is secure. No matter, like, if you know that no matter what, you're not going to give up, then you can't possibly lose. If you don't give up and you refuse to, like, if you refuse to give up and you also improve, it's guaranteed that you're going to win because you're constantly making improvements and you're never quitting. That time will come. Like, how much time? Like, it's uncertain for everyone, but that time will come where boom, you start to see the success that's been accumulating over the years, and it like happens fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when it happens, it's just like super fast. You're literally like, the way I always think about it is like you're literally like maybe one campaign away, like one, like maybe three key roles in your agency away from seeing like a jump in revenue, a substantial jump. You're only like really three people away in your agency from doing that,
For sure.
realistically, right? Three or four, maybe five in some cases. And the one that I've always had, just like throughout my entire life, has been like hard work always pays off. Like, because sometimes like your whatever you're putting in, like, you might not see the direct reflection of that in that time, in that period, in that season that you're going through. Your inputs don't actually like reflect in your outputs because it's so like substantially like misproportioned. You might be working ridiculously hard and then seeing like very little payoff. Like I did in the beginning of my agency, like I was pretty much working for probably $2 an hour kind of thing. If we look at how much I made versus
Mm-hmm.
how much I worked, it was like very unbalanced, right? But I always knew like hard work always pays off. I knew that because I've had references experiences from it, just in other things that I've done in the past. So because I had those references experience, and like I knew like no matter what, like hard work always pays off. I always repeated that in my head, and sure enough, it did exponentially,
Yeah.
right? So it took like years for me to see that fruition, but it did, right? And I knew it would because I've seen it in other ones. So when I kept true to that, it was like, bam, like this is like every time you see that for yourself, every other hard time that you go through, it just becomes a little bit easier. It's still like kind of tough, like, it still sucks, but like, that you're going to get through it.
For sure.
And the last one that has really helped me is just trusting the process. Trust that like the season that you're going to right now is preparing you for the next level in your life. You're like it's literally every single time that there's been a tough time, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Going back to the first one that I mentioned, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And so I pretty much just took it like one day at a time, and I just trusted the process. I just looked at the day right in front of me. I was like, hey, I'm not going to focus on like how impossible this goal seems. I'm just going to focus on today. All I have is today. And that's true. Like, all you have to influence your future 5 years from now, 1 year from now, all you have is literally like right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big believer that you have everything you need in this specific moment. Um, you know, there's always something that you can do to get yourself to the next level. Could be you have prospects in your pipeline, and you have, past clients, you have current clients, you have opportunities at your disposal. Most of the time I find like a lot of people aren't just, they're not looking hard enough. But if you do, you'll find that the opportunity is always there. Like, you always have some opportunity there that you can take advantage of to get you at least closer to your goal that day. So yeah, those are some of the ones that have been like super, super helpful that I use up until this day. Like, and there'll probably be more that I'll add on to that as I learn more and more. But these have been like battle tested. Like, for me, I've always thought of these and kept this front of mind. And it's served me like incredibly well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Austin, what do you think that's been for you? Like, what are
Yeah.
some of the things?
Those are super solid. This too shall pass. The end is secure. Like you can, like the only way that you'll lose is if you give up. The brick by brick analogy, love that. Just like working hard, and then of course just like being present in the day to day and not like letting the fear of the future or what you're doing is super good, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Um, yeah, I feel like at this point in my age, in like in the agency space, my stress capacity is pretty, like my stress callus is pretty strong. Like, I heard Grant Cardone um was on a podcast, and the guy was like, how much alcohol does it take to get alcoholic drunk? And it's like a lot. And it's like, how much stress does it take to get a 5-year agency owner stressed? Probably a lot, because you're so like immune to it, and like you're
Yeah.
so intact with it. But yeah, a few things come to mind. And like specifically like hard times for us could be like losing clients, or losing money and not having a profitable month, or losing team members where you feel like you're not doing good enough, or if a client leaves, like you don't feel like you're good enough, and like it's not like a good service, and like you get all these negative thoughts, and you feel like quitting, or you feel like people are saying no all the time on sales call, and like you're uncertain about like your offer and stuff like that. But like the first thing that comes to mind is like zooming out. Like it's like one of the favorite quotes that I love is like, you can't see a forest if you're in the trees. And it's like you can't really, like what you're talking about, like emotions, like letting emotions dictate you. It's like you can't like see the big picture if you're in the weeds of like all of the business stuff. So like taking a moment to zoom out and just realizing like what you were saying, it's temporary. It's like if you're gonna have your agency for 12 months and you have a negative month, like yeah, that sucks. But if you're gonna have your agency for 5 years, 6 years, or whatever your end goal with it is, and you have one bad month, like what is that from a percentage perspective? Like that's like 2% of your whole business is like has one bad month or whatever. And it's like I always like to pull up quarterly earnings reports from some of these big corporations and see like how many billions of dollars that they lose. And then I'm like, okay, I feel better about myself. So like one, just like zooming out, like can't see a forest if you're in the trees. So taking a moment, like macro. And then just like the reason that you're an entrepreneur and like you signed up for this as an agent owner, this is the second point, is like you're here to learn and you're here to fail. And it's going to be inevitable. And instead of thinking of failure as like this is the end all be all, I'm like screwed. This is like um the end of the business, and like going down that like spiral. Just thinking of it as like a learning lesson. Like, okay, I learned from this. How can I improve on it? That's going to stack on to the next time I get into this situation and not be nearly as affected that much. For example, if a client cancels, rather than being like, oh my God, all my clients are going to cancel, they hate me, I suck, you think, okay, what can I learn from this lesson that can help me retain clients in the future? So turning the word failure to the word like learning lesson has been really helpful for me, and just like taking the emotions out of business, because like it's like you are not your business. The business is something that you're operating from like systems and like a sales perspective, and you're working it. And then like figuring out how you can learn from it to improve on it. So those are the two things, like zooming out, um and then yeah, and then just taking it as like a learning lesson. But I think it's
Yeah.
tough, man. I think just like the mindset stuff, just in general, like especially going through hard times, is like super important. That's why like we try to talk about it with agency owners as much as possible, and like really press on that and include on all the onboarding forums, and like make that really clear in the agency portals that work with us, and like ask questions about their mindset, because I think there's like a huge correlation to your mindset to how your business is doing, or your mindset to like optimal performance as a company. And like as a leader, especially, I think it's so important to like be feeding your mind and like avoiding news and figuring out how you can build resilience around all that stuff. So what
100%. Yeah.
like how do you feel like a strong mindset correlates to performance as an agency owner?
Yeah, it's pretty much like the leadership thing. Like everything that you as the leader of your agency do, say, think, will get like it'll trickle down to like the whole like agency. Like
Yeah.
you'll like if you're like even if you're stressed out and like you are like um let's say like kind of I'm just gonna say like vomiting that stress, or you're kind of like putting that out onto others, like that's gonna trickle in. Like you do that to like let's say your client success manager, it'll like trickle over to your clients. If you do that for your operations person, it'll trickle on over to them. Like it's one of those things that like for me, I've always like every day, like I read something that's gonna like feed my mind. And I always make it a strong effort to like read a lot on things of like people that achieved great things so that I can have like just a different perspective, especially during times like this. Cause like the last thing you want to do, and one thing I've always made it a point to is like if I'm going through an extremely hard time, if I feel like, damn, like this is just freaking tough, I'm not gonna like spread that onto your team because really you're the protector of your agency, right?
Yeah.
Your employees there are like you're pretty much like an umbrella for them to protect them from the storm. Is the way that I kind of see it. So the last thing you want to do is kind of like break or show. I don't know if the right word would be like weakness, but like show that you have that stress or you're going through hard times. Like you want to be the rock in your agency. Otherwise, like if you're not that leader, it's going to directly probably people are going to start leaving because you're like, if you're being rude to people or like being like extremely like a bad leader. Most of the time, like a lot of times where people leave, it's because of like management issues or like the leaders like I read that somewhere, I forgot where, but people like leave due to like management most of the
Totally.
time.
Yeah.
So that's where you start like losing people. And then all of those have like trickle effects to everything else. So like literally you could be pissed off one day and then talk to your, I don't know, your team member in a not so pleasurable way, like not so good way. And then that will lead into one thing and then another thing. So I always think about that, like just maintaining like being the rock in the agency because really your mindset it starts with what's in your head but it'll like be reflected in your business
Mm.
if you're not like being careful of how you're operating, how you're behaving. All that starts with like what's going on in your head, and then if you're not as careful with how you're behaving, it'll trickle on to the rest of the agency.
Yeah, I think it's key that like as a leader, as a CEO, especially if you have a team, is like just learning to stay in neutral. And I think it goes back to like what I said previously about like just zooming out and not getting so emotional in the business, but like learning to stay in neutral and using more of the logical side of the brain. Because we have like an emotional side and a logical side, and it's like just acknowledging the logical side and staying in neutral. Because like what you said, I mean, if I'm like super emotional and I lose my like grip on the agency, like that's going to trickle down to everybody. And if I'm not convicted on the vision, the mission, the growth of the agency, then it's going to perish. Like without a vision, the people perish. That's in the Bible, and it's like I believe that, and I believe it as a company, and I believe as a CEO, you have to be the most convicted about the vision, the most optimistic about where you're going, or it's going to, like what you said, trickle down to everybody else, and they're gonna slip on it. And also, we have like mirror neurons, right? Meaning like if somebody smiles at you, like you're gonna smile back, right? Most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you're stressed and somebody sees you stressed, then they're gonna feel stressed. So like if you can control your emotions and have a good mindset around your team, like they're gonna mimic what you do. Um, and like your optimism about the future and the growth of the agency and all that stuff. So I think it's super, super powerful. Hard to do. Um, but once you can understand it, like I really like what's that guy's name? Joe, Joe, Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza is really good as far
Yeah.
as like
Okay.
mindset stuff.
Yeah.
The more you like learn about it, like if you could just like learn, like if you're an agency owner listening and you're like, I have no idea about mindset, just like learn about it. And like your mind is a muscle and you can change it, you can grow it, you can shift it. We have reticulator activating systems that we can literally like start to see the positive in things and just find some habits and just simply learn about how powerful the mind is and how to build resilience in the mind. And it's amazing what you can accomplish for yourself and business as well.
Yeah, the term for it is neuroplasticity. It's
Yeah, there you
basically
go.
like basically it's that your brain is like I'm just gonna use the word changeable,
Yeah.
where whatever environment you put it in or like whatever thoughts, emotions you like put in your system, like thoughts that you're thinking, emotions that you're constantly feeling, like those things affect your brain and like all the pathways that are going on in your brain. So you're literally like changing your brain. What it was like even a year ago, 6 months ago, it's not the same as what it is now because of
Totally.
all the inputs that you're putting it. And so because it's so malleable, it's like clay, you can influence it. Most people, because they're not aware of that and like they don't kind of listen to podcasts like this, or they don't put that effort into it, like they don't do that work to try to like change their brain and try to operate just on a different level, have new levels of thoughts. When you consider that all of the thoughts that you're having are pretty much the exact same, like most of the time, like I think 95% something, and then like the 90s,
Yeah.
90 something percent are
Yeah.
like literally the exact same thoughts that you're having. So if you can
Totally.
become a lot more aware of those, you then have the ability to now change those. And obviously not in a single day or in a single second, but habitually you begin to change your thoughts and emotions, which are the very things that create your personality, which influences your personal reality, which is what Joe Dispenza says.
Yeah.
And all of those things, if you're able to like just simply like even change like how you react to things, that will directly impact your bank account. I promise, because I've experienced it. I'm sure
Yeah.
Austin has as well. All of those things that seemingly appear that are not related are very much related in ways you like probably we can't even understand. Yeah, they all have a very strong correlation. If we're able to like take care of our mind, body, spirit, it will directly correlate into how we operate in business. Um, for a lot of people, it's really just seeing that connection, like how these two coordinate. But once you see it, it's almost like you already look behind the curtain. Like you can't unlook at certain things. And now you know, like, all right, cool. Like I need to like control what's going on a lot more. I need to work on my mindset. I need to like really work on this thing so that I can grow my agency. Because oftentimes, like a lot of people that we talk to and like we get on the calls with that apply for Agency U, many times a lot of these individuals are going to be freelancers. They're the biggest bottleneck
Mm-hmm.
in the agency. They are literally like the biggest bottleneck. It's not like the client acquisition. It's not like the offer. Yes, it might be some of those things, but like sometimes literally like the biggest thing is like the person who's running it is oftentimes the biggest bottleneck,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
That manifests in so many different ways. Like it could just be like overthinking, perfectionism, all of
Yeah.
these things, like just too risk averse to where like they're not even willing to do anything that is outside of what they've known because it's too uncertain. All of these things stop agency owners from growing their agencies, right? Even if they had a client acquisition system, even if you had literally everything and all the tools and strategies, but the person wasn't aligned to that, it literally like
For sure.
would not work.
100%. Yeah, man. That's good. What about like any specific like stories or things in your agency that come to mind when you think about like hurdles or challenging periods or anything like that at Maverick?
Yeah, the challenging, I would say like the big ones that come to mind are like definitely COVID and then like the beginning. Like for me, and I know I mentioned this like another episode, like leaving your job, like leaving what you consider to be like safety,
Mhm.
what to you is like signified as safety, and leaving that is like pretty like shock to your system, especially for those that like do that for the first time. Once you're already like an entrepreneur and like you're already used to it and like you kind of already know like all right, I'm like responsible for like my income and all that kind of stuff, like it's just normal. But when you make that shift, like it's kind of a shock to your system, and there's a lot of fear. I remember I felt at that time like tons of fear. So it was really like an eye-opening experience for like really working myself and really getting to know myself, like wow, these are the things that have been hiding under the surface. That was covered by like the safety of the job, but those things were all there just dormant. And it's almost like it was just activated by like the shift and the transition into like a new thing. That's where like boom, like now you like face yourself, right? And then you have two options, like either like you retreat and you go back to the job, or you like overcome yourself. So that was one that was like extremely challenging for me. But then there's just like constant ones that happen, right? There's like events, but then there's just like recurring things that happen. Like, let's say clients complain or clients threaten to cancel, or even worse, like let's say you have a client who like threatens to refund. Like all of these are pretty like generally not the best, like they're not the best situations to handle. So like if you have like, for example, like, you know, when you have a 7-figure agency, like a lot of things are happening all at once, because you have so many clients, team members, a lot of life is happening to you. And so just in general, like the bigger the agency gets, like, yes, a lot of reward, a lot of benefits, extremely worth it. But there's also like things that come with that. Like, you know, just generally like having to be responsible for like other people's like income is one that definitely like comes to mind. Having like, let's say clients complain, not all your clients are going to be like happy all the time. They'll have something to say, like internal, let's say employee stuff that happens, or let's say an important employee like leaves. All of these things are like things that events or just things that come up. Even like when I was just myself in my agency and I was like taking the sales calls, like hearing no so many times. Like in the beginning, I literally took like 30 calls, did not close a single one. Like that's extremely discouraging. Most people would quit. Most people would quit after like having 5 calls and
For
like not
sure.
getting a sale. Um, so talking to 30 people and literally not getting even one. Like I remember for me, I was even doing free trials and people wouldn't buy. Like what the, I mean, they wouldn't sign on. Like that is extremely discouraging,
Yeah.
right? It kind of like takes a toll on the mind. Um, so it's all these kind of things like I feel a lot of people like agency owners wouldn't talk about, or it's not really as like, yeah, it's not really a conversation, but it's like the reality. And then that's the reality. And like these are the things that we do to like be able to like push past that. And the more that you do it, it's kind of like how Austin said, you really kind of become numb to it. It doesn't really affect you as much. It's kind of just like the normal, and it kind of just reduces its effect. The more that you come across these situations, you already know how to handle it. You feel prepared. So more than anything, like I think that's what it is like you just feel like certain in yourself, confident in yourself. And that trust in yourself is really what gets you through like these challenging periods. I find that one of several other factors, but if there was one that was extremely like with all the other 7-figure agency owners that I know, like even in other industries, like 7-figure guys that run online businesses, I would say like all, if there's one pattern, like all of them have, among other things, self-trust, like confidence in one's own ability, and resilience to be able to endure tough times.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely echo like as you grow, complexity grows. Like because you're managing team and emotions and people and then more clients and more vulnerable to cancellations and you have less control because you're relying on other people to do the job for you and then it's ultimately your responsibility because you're the leader. I think for like me when I think of like challenging periods, like we've had times where like we haven't made profit in the month or like have lost money or have had to lay people off because clients canceled and stuff along those lines and that can be really hard like all of those things and you feel like you're not doing a good job your team's not doing a job and then to go out and like have to like lay people off and like really affect like their livelihood like our job it wasn't remote like they were in person we built relationships with everybody that we worked with and it was pretty challenging to do. Specifically, I remember we had to lay off somebody who had been working with us probably for like 2 years and was a leader at the company. And unfortunately, like it was very tough because they were very influential within the company and like all of that stuff. And I did it, and I remember it was like the first time I ever had to like lay anybody off, and my heart rate was like at 156, 160, just like waiting for it to happen because it was in person. Like it was
Yeah.
it was rough, um but yeah, man. But I think like again, going back to what I first said is like I learned so much from that process that made me better for the long term. Like if I would have kept avoiding it or pushing it under the rug, like there's no way that the lesson that I would have learned would have helped the company in the long run. And of course, there's like strategies and ways to do stuff like that. But I think the key is finding the lesson through the hurdle and like again pulling your emotion from it and just seeing it as a part of the process of building a company and like and realizing that it's temporary, like what you're saying, and that it's just part of the process of the bigger picture to get you there.
Yeah. And when you said that, like, dude, I was like remembering, I had like flashbacks when you said that about the heart racing. Like, there was like so
Yeah,
many
bro.
moments where I was like the first time I had like a client threaten to refund or like, like letting go of an employee, like things like that. Those are like, when you first do it, it's just like, oh man, like I just like
Yeah.
been thinking about it the whole day. And like, what am I going to say? Like all this kind of stuff. You feel like your heart racing and it's just like,
It consumes you, like you're
you're,
thinking about it all the time. Like you
yeah.
can't
And
focus
then,
on much else other than that big conversation that you have.
yeah. And then it's really just like walking through the fire. Like yeah, I remember like I just didn't even want to like open up the Zoom link to
Yeah.
like have the conversation because literally it's like not like literally it's one of the most uncomfortable things if like you've never had to do it before, like just really is like not good
Yeah.
at all. Like I would rather do a million other things than do that. But then you just walk through the fire and then you understand like, all right, cool, like this wasn't like as bad. Like yes, it sucks, like it's feeling like kind of like not great after this. But like now the next time and like the 10th time or whatever it is that you encounter a difficult situation, now it's like, okay, cool, like you have more experience, you know how to maneuver these situations, and then it becomes less painful for both people. Like I'm sure like let's say the fourth time or whatever was definitely like not the same as the first, because like now
Totally.
you like know how to let them off easy, like do it in the right way that's like the least impactful, like negatively impactful
Yeah.
for both people,
Yeah.
right? In a way that if it needs to happen, we can do it in a way that's like for the best possible outcome, as
Yeah.
best as it can be. So that's kind
And
of what I've
yeah.
noticed as well.
Yeah, no, that's money. And I think I think the last thing that I think would be really helpful to hit on is like how like how to prepare for stuff like this and like planning for it or like mentally preparing. And I think some things that have helped me is one, having a mentor, like being able to like bounce ideas off of somebody and like somebody who's like really like outside of the forest, if you want to use that analogy again, and can like see the big picture and like not have an emotion and is totally a consultative role to like talk to you about it and talk through it, who's done stuff like this. And then what's actually helped me a lot is like writing down stuff and like journaling a little bit and processing through like written word or like notes. Like for example, if I'm gonna have a hard conversation during a challenging time, like I'm actually going to write out exactly what I'm going to say to them and make sure that it's framed in a way that is with love, with extreme ownership, but also getting my point across that I need to communicate and do that in an effective way.
I have a similar thing. I have like three different things that I do. Number one is yeah, like a mentor. Like for me, when it came to like leadership, like people management, I was part of a mentorship program that one of their calls was like literally like HR related, which was like an
Nice.
HR manager that worked like with some of the biggest internet companies, and staffed like their companies with closers and all that kind of stuff. She was really, really good at people management and like setting expectations, onboarding, like just in general, like good management. So I learned a lot, and I would bring scenarios to those calls that really like some of those solutions. I was like, wow, I would have never like thought of that. Like I wouldn't have approached it in that way. Like it was almost like my level of, because here's the thing, like your brain will only like for solutions, it'll kind of just reference all the things that you already know. That's where you pull from your solutions, right? but it takes someone that's already kind of been there, done that, and like has experienced a lot more to be able to be like, okay, like actually no, like do it this way. And then you get a better outcome. So for me, like mentorship as well has always been like some of those most valuable things. It could literally, like, I'm sure it's probably saved at least two key team members. Um, like, yeah, for sure one, like maybe two, as a result of that type of mentorship that I had. And then the second thing is like, you know, from these programs that I've been in, like masterminds and all that stuff, you start to get these friendships and with other people that are at the same level that you're at. And I'll always just like run things by them. And what I usually find is like they'll usually have a different perspective on things, or a different, like, they'll view it differently than I would. There's a different perspective there. And that's super valuable, because then, like how Austin said, like you're getting like something different, right? Instead of being in the weeds, you're looking at things a lot more emotionally, as compared to someone who's like doesn't have as much context. And that's why they can give you better perspective on this kind of thing. And then the last one is like kind of what um like Austin, what you mentioned there, like I usually like run my decision making based on like certain like compasses. Like for example, like what's my vision, purpose, like all that kind of stuff, my value, my core values, my principles. These are the things that are like your guiding principles, like how you operate life, your operating system. And so if you have a framework for how you make decisions, then how you operate, how you're able to scale is just a lot more effective. And these type of decisions are a lot better to do, a lot better. These decisions are a lot better to make because you have like frameworks, and you know like who you are, and like, you know, what things you'll tolerate and what not. And that for me has been really effective. So I'll have like a 3-tiered approach, like mentors, someone at my level, and then these guiding principles that I follow, like vision, core values, all that kind of stuff, so that I really make sure that I can make the right decisions and then do it in the right way.
Good. Super good. Yeah, I like the core values, and just like if your company has core values, then it's pretty easy to make a decision on how you're wanting to go about executing based off of your core values, especially like personnel stuff. Super good. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, follow wherever you're following. Be sure to follow us both on Instagram, as we post content to add even more value outside of this on Instagram, as well as YouTube as well. And if you're an agency owner, you're looking to grow, scale, want to work with Gilberto and I one-on-one, feel free to hit the link down in the description to book a call with our team to see if you could be a fit for working with us. And if not, then we will see you on the next episode.